Rinpoche first requests us to set our mind in the noble disposition of bodhicitta, intending to study and practice Dharma for the welfare of sentient beings throughout the limitless expanse of space, wishing in loving care to bring each and every one of those beings to the utterly perfect and most pure, precious state of enlightenment. And in our study of Dhamma, now we are looking at this text which is called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya, a text on Mahamudra, and within that text we are studying shamatha meditation, meditation of peaceful stability. In this section on shamatha, it starts out by saying there is a need to use the body well and to use the mind well. And in fact it's expressed as the essential things for the body and the essential things for the mind. And we've already considered the posture, which is the main thing for the body. Our meditation experience is connected to the way our body is. Our meditation experience is connected to the activities of the mind, and body and mind themselves are connected. And this means when the body is not set properly, then this has an influence on the mind, and it makes the meditation harder to achieve fruition. The This is the advice, and this is the advice especially for beginners, because we need to start out somewhere and to develop on from that. And the example that Rinpoche has given already in this course is a very appropriate one. How first, if we are learning language and all the sophistication of thought, then first we need to learn the alphabet and go on from there. Once we've got the alphabet, we can learn to put the letters together, read the words, and gradually it becomes deeper and more sophisticated. And it's like, and if we never really learn the alphabet in the first place, then all of the rest is so hard or impossible to follow on. And it's like this with shamatha. First steps first, and then on the basis of those one can continue, because the main point of all of this meditation is to understand the mind. That's why it's all there. But this understanding of the mind is something that is subtle and sophisticated, and without the first steps, then it will be very, very hard to go on and just simply understand the mind without all of the right training. And this will be like, if we go back to the analogy of the alphabet, if we can only cope with a few words or with our own language, and we have to, when we travel, take our dictionaries and all the time be doing a lot of work to interpret everything into the language we know, this will be very hard work. Whereas if we develop a skill, a linguistic skill, then we can understand each thing in its own circumstances. So in this way, our meditation training needs to develop to embrace many things. Yesterday we were introduced to the first meditation technique, and even though it's the first one, in fact this is called the king of shamatha techniques. It's the very finest. It's the ultimate technique. So there are three ways of describing it. It's the king of techniques, it's the highest or ultimate technique, and it's the very finest. And if you remember, that was for the mind not to dwell on the past in any way, for the mind not to anticipate the future in any way, and then as far as the living present moment is concerned, just to sit naturally with whatever arises, with that becoming the focus point for the meditation within that second. This is the king of meditation techniques, and if one can manage that, then if you can manage that, you don't need any of the other shamatha techniques. That's the king, that's the ultimate. It's like, if we go back to the analogy of language, if already you're very gifted in English, you can read it, understand poetry and sophisticated things, there's absolutely no point in going back to learn the alphabet. No point at all. Or with Tibetan language, you don't need to learn the Tibetan letters if you can read Tibetan well. So like this, if this meditation can be accomplished, then the others are not necessary.
되니 다 요 마시나 다 가리시에 걸리지나나 되니 다 연바 초거바리 소래.
So, although it's the finest technique, it's not the easiest. And especially for beginners, it may not be that easy to master. And so the text, the instructions say, if you can do this technique, then that's the best. But if not, then, and so then after that we have a series of techniques which are more suitable, or let's say which are suitable for beginners who can't really get much result from that king of techniques.
드니 여다 가리려오지 초글레리라나 다 나로서 우보지 따사지 요바동 다 우보지 마임바지 건바니 레 동보바라나 다 우보지 요바지 거나 때도 레라와 요바래 건히바 다 우보 메바지나 세때도지 디디도 건제 거나나 누루 마제바 대도지 니샤 마템반다고 지도 딘디요 바래.
As far as let's say more accessible techniques for beginners are concerned, then there are those which use a support, a tangible support, and those without a tangible support. Those with a tangible support use some object, most often an object to look at, for instance, as a focus, as an anchor for the mind, and the ones without a support don't have this external or this concrete anchor. And of those two, perhaps the one that uses some tangible support is the most accessible. For a beginner, the mind is less likely to wander when it's anchored on some tangible support.
Pena ngaronso ngpo thong manu ba jido ta senla ta ji jangana le lawo yo ba mare ngpo thong nyowa ji senla jangana te zo le lawo na yo re ta de no yo ta ngpo ji gana te zo ji le thong bo ba la ji gon la ba dong sen te zo ji ni shan da wo de yo ba re.
So this use of a support is in fact quite convenient as a first step for a beginner to meditate on. When there's something that you have, your meditation practice means you sit, you look at an object, you keep your gaze, your visual awareness focused on that object, you bring it back when it wanders. This is something that's quite doable. And when there isn't a tangible support, when the focus is in the imagination or somewhere else, it's harder, it's less simple to maintain it than when you have something right there in front of you to focus on. This is why it's easier.
Dinyo gona na gonsa ga sani de la yon mo mon chiala na ta gali khawado te to le labo chubonda sani la pimpun yo pare
sani de gongge sacha
gongge sacha.
Then also, when one's a real beginner in meditation, it's very helpful to find the right sort of environment to meditate in, a place which is conducive to meditation.
Tindilana gom jesaga sani de monde de zoji chibondawo yona be pendo yo bare pa chimbo sa yambo de zoji pa thoni bo mido chu ride zanda ta de ina de zoji senla 거도 본다고 지다 생활하니 대조지 충분하고 좋아하고 말해 대인하나 단 강제 된디시나는 생활 대조 조범에 반다고 동 생활 대조지 거도라고 좋아하고 말해.
What is helpful is a place which is nice, a place which is spacious. Because when it's a pleasant place to be in, and when you're not cramped in, when your eyes can see for some distance, when there's a feeling of space and openness, then in those circumstances, because it's a nice place, the mind can relax into its concentration more easily, more readily. Whereas if you have a feeling of being confined, or the place isn't that nice a place to be, it already makes some agitation, some distraction that hinders a bit the process of focusing.
Tendera gangjesada te zoji ndan chebo rawo jide ngoso pe chebo rawo khombayina te zoji yongwan rawo ngoso ta dendi yodina sala pe phentu rawo mongchala yo bare di khatswa ta hong yo la gana mothangji sonong tong munda ba yo bare di mongchalan phentu yo bare ta ro ti na kha ko jire kale gana.
So this spaciousness is quite important, whether it's in terms of what's outdoors, or whether it's, if you're in a room, then in a room that has some sense of spaciousness where you're not cramped in. For most people, this is very, very helpful. Not for everybody, because people are different, and so that's up to each person to find out just which circumstances are conducive, the ones which do help you when you sit down to practice, where they help you to get into the practice as quickly as possible. But for most people, this feeling of spaciousness, of a nice place to be to meditate, is supportive.
Ta de dawaga ta sanila ta ngaroso gom jedutela ta ki dadi hibatidu yo dendi se gidulan le dombo bala yo kali khabo yo dutela na teni mi ba ji la tiang ka bare teni mi ba da kare na wo ji la tiang ga re la na sure ta ro kare re mina mi pa ti na ri re mi pa kare gona yana yong ta dinong de lo pa da ta hin ra wo yin na ra ta ki de gan ra wo yin na ra me na chang ra wo ti le ra wo ta dendi kare yin na chung ji la mi pa ti na pe ya bu yo re rong gan dan de la yo hong dan di go de pe na dan de zun du gong de la ka song a ro so nang nong chu de ja de li xe won dan de ge le la re de de li xe de la na ta mi ge ta sa de so yu bin cham ji ka so xie ra de li xe won de la di so yu ba ni pa ta tho rin che so na yong xie ro ya bu men du de mi pa ta la de ge de na de zo ji mi ge ji tong ta ma tan da wo ji xie du tho nie che so na yong de yong de bu men du ta rong ge tho nie ri ta ka ri xie ge na rong ge ta ni de ni pe na khom ba da wo de ri na ta khom ba la ti le da wo ta de ri de rong go me na ta ti so le ya ji mu bu de ri chung chung ji ja na de da ba me na一般的我ji ya zong ni ding过了大ji个人人的领导等你提炼的我ji大chung chung ji变能等着我经过了呢da等你chung na be phen do yo le ma xin na ga le chung chung等你ji na mi ba le de zo ji ni ba la phen do yo le de mi ba de la ne mi ge de du de la ne ni zo ga za zo da nian mu ni be na nga ro so mi du bo ji la ne ye ge ma thong na ye ge nde he ge yo na be za za zo ki ta ra de ni da wo xie nian mu ni de ni xie de la lo bo xie gong ko ro rong gong tong zang ji de di hi ba de zang ji xie de ni zo gang de de me on ki te ko la be za za zo de ni xie de na de ni on de zo ji san mu ni ba dong de ni gang na de zo ka li ka bo ya de ni na mi la yong cha wa da mi ze wa da ngo yong ngo na wa da de ni mo bo le de
using a focus, something to focus on, is very, very useful for beginners. So once we've got the right sort of place, then we need to set the mind on an object. And actually, any sort of focus, and I think here we're talking about visual focus, any sort of visual focus will do. What it is doesn't matter too much. It's an anchor for the awareness. So in one way, anything will do. But then classically in the texts, we're given some suggestions which are very helpful. And it says, focus on a small piece of wood, or a pebble, a small stone, or else on a dot. It means making a circle of light, a little coloured circle, something to fix your attention to. And when that's the case, then small is better. Not a big thing, not a big piece of wood, not a big rock to meditate on, but smallish, quite small. This helps the mind to focus. This helps. And so yesterday we had the day before, the instructions in posture. So when we are sitting in the correct posture, with all of the 7 points and the chin and the eyes and so on, then in that posture, it's said that the gaze is focused, is parked. The gaze is parked, the eye energy is parked, some 4 fingers in front of the nose. Well, now when we focus on an object, that's not the case anymore. The eyes will be looking at the object of meditation, but given that we're sitting in that posture, we need the object that we're focused on placed somewhere convenient. We don't want the fact of having to look at the object to be something which spoils the posture. We don't want to be looking down too much or looking up. We need to be able to maintain the posture, so then to find some way to put the focus object conveniently in front of the eyes. Too far away is not good. Too far away is not good because one has to use the visual power too much to be aware of it. Too close is not too good because that strains the eyes, it makes the eyes cross. So we need to find a place for the object which is where the gaze can settle on it very, very naturally and conveniently. And then once you've found that place, then we are not looking at it intently. It's simply an anchor for our consciousness. Our visual consciousness is settled with that object. And it's not like when, for instance, if you're reading and it's small print and you can't quite read it, so then you have to really squint very hard or look very hard. We're not looking at the object to try to analyze it or do anything like that. If we're looking at it too much, the eyes get strained, the eyes water, you get headaches, sometimes you can get hallucinations, eye flickering. We are not staring at it, looking at it. It is just simply an anchor point for visual consciousness.
Di kasala di ta dega inanda tile inanda kari la gona di kadu kari ndawunde sebore mabore tini ko jelanda inanda ta kari ndawuyona desala sono tonya mundu koron tong zamji da dela hiba mainba sejima do deila tanda kaboro maboro oya damboro wa ta trige mandawo trasandawo ta yakare yona ti yatara sono tonya mandu ti yatara sono tona bena kaboro sona on kaboro no to sabati le du on maboro tena on no to ti le diore on trige trasare te tendi sono tona ti kare ndo redina on no to tsule on yore se ni va ya po yo mari kare dina no to re se no to kale chondu yore 인디디라나 코론통 장지제니 롱가 감두지마도 더 세보고 마보고 저게레 저선리 틸레레서 드리시니 선노 동냐면도 드리서 선노 동나 다 노도지 니 삼세 된 노도 몸보 지토도 요래 세야도 문이시나 세니 히오 말이 기니야 보지리오 말이 디나는 세안도 코론폴라 캬 점데라 미바디지마도
Once we have the object in place and we are placing our visual consciousness with it, then there should be no analysis of the object or thinking about it in terms of, or let's say there's a pebble, for instance, or a little coloured dot that we've drawn as a focus, then there's no thinking it's yellow or it's red or it's white. or it's triangular, or it's square, or it has this sort of a pattern, or that sort of a pattern. This sort of analysis is not at all required. It's not at all part of the meditation. On the contrary, it's something that detracts from the meditation, because that object is simply there as a support for settling the mind. And any idea like yellow or red or round or square or any of these details about the object is in fact a thought. And one thought tends to lead to another thought, and then the mind wanders away. It starts thinking about yellowness, roundness, or any of these things. It gets distracted. The point of this meditation is not to think, it is to settle the mind. So this is why it is simply there as an anchor for visual consciousness and as a place to bring back the awareness whenever it does start to wander off in thought or elsewhere. This is transmission. Then, so when, for instance, if this were the object of meditation, then it's a little white piece of tissue, paper, then its white is one thought, and then its square is a second thought. It's made of paper is a third thought, and there's a little pattern on it. That's a fourth thought. And it's quite convenient, actually, these small little bits of paper and so on. It just goes one thought after another. This isn't what we're doing. There's nothing to do with looking at, analysing the object. The object is simply a support for visual consciousness, a support for consciousness.
Te tsochi gam tendi se ona na ta on noto matempa on te tsochi nyoku andra wo don ta tendi yon shong wa re yon mena uni pe noto mombo uni gam gana gam ma pa kali tendi yon ka le wa re ta dino ne laba da ta nyanda ku ta tendi re ona na teni te tsochi noto troga wa re Troni, Teni, Ticasala, the Caresia Gredina, Ta, Ore, and the Cabo, Trayer, Horo, Song, not to Kahi, and Trosigare. Two not to taste of don't or and the Tragere, the Chunjin song, that not to New the two. Rere la Soni, Tentisegona, not to share a Mumbo Mareti, Yendena, not to improve. Teni zo son no to re son no to Trayo son Trayi la son no to te Teni cabo la cabo son no to te digo Chunshun la chunshun son re la mi passe ni poni Teni gon jana te ji nyo kujina de tala Teni on peto yore.
When one's practicing the meditation, then what happens is that the mind becomes distracted from this focus, it wanders away, or sometimes one gets sleepy and heavy-minded, or sometimes it's just not possible to stay with the focus. The mind is too busy, one's too uncomfortable. Now, if those sort of things happen, so that one's really lost the idea of simply resting the mind with that object, then, on the contrary, we do think about those qualities, because this helps restore the meditation. So just a little bit, we have the object, and it's white. Yes, it's white. So we stay just for a little while with the whiteness, and it's square, so then we stay just for a little while with the squareness, and it's small, so we stay a little while with its smallness. Not too much, but just a little bit, and this actually brings us back into the practice if we've got too sleepy or too busy-minded.
Teni gombi tuzo de pe yang tung tu xie ge ba re nga ro so la ka song ma la de gong song la yin kama san yo rina kama nga ta tri yan gong nya mu du nga ro so pe na tu jen la gong je ten ji di la chi so re re ni re si pa gong hi re mu ni san la song no dong la dong bi ka se le de zo ji gong hi na me hi de me de ni ji ma la pa xian yo zhen mo zhen zhuo bo zhong mo le ka da nda me de ni zhen hiu ji re mo ya de ni la la ne se ni hiu ji re de ni wo la la ne ken sa de wo pa da zi da de ni xie hiu re ko nian di zhen wo de ni wo ge hiu ji re de de ji chuan lo ba re de ni yin di la ka ma nga ka ma san yo nga de ni ji la gam di gam zi la mu ni ta ni pa dam di ni wo de zu ge yong da wo xi ka ma yo nga de ni ji la ge yong da wo xi de ni wo ka ma nga da wo gam wo ka ma nga da wo mi su de ni xie na bien na chi su ni la gam na tan da wo ji chi su ni xie wo na di chi su ji de ya po ji gam chao de wo ba re chi su ji de chuo lang da wo chao de wo re mu ni chi su ni la nga ro gam ji le yin si gam yo na ta ka ma chi chong a chi ya po ji yo le me le de me ba de gam yo si pe ka li ka bo re nga ti na pe ka li ka bo re tan de chi su ni se gam teng kan de wo zo ji de dan ba to me na gam te ma ri nga ro tan du.
When we are training in this practice, then it is very, very important to practice with short, accurate bursts. So 3 minutes, 4 minutes, at the most 5 minutes, certainly no more. And very often when we have our meditation time, then the actual session that we allocate for meditation practice is 1 hour or say 2 hours. Actually, if we look at what happens with most people when they do an hour's meditation, if we could break down that hour and analyze it, then most of the time is spent thinking of your friends, thinking of your home, thinking of different circumstances, or else you get fidgety or interested what's in the room. If we look at how much time within the hour is actually spent with the focus, it won't be that much. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Whereas what we do when we train in meditation is we have 3, 4, at the most 5 minutes, good meditation, disciplined meditation. The mind is with the object, and then 3, 4, 5 minutes, total relaxation. And then come back, 5 more minutes, very good meditation, high quality meditation, 5 more minutes relaxation. That way, if you did say a 2-hour session, you'll have had 1 hour which was good shamatha, and 1 hour which was, say, lost in rest. But there was 1 hour of good shamatha. Whereas if you try and sit for 2 hours solid with your mind on that focus, really and truly, how much of the time will be spent in good quality meditation on the focus? Probably not even 15 minutes, if we're really correct about it. So Rinpoche says this is an important point, and it's very, very useful way to practice.
Tani ta rong komba non da wuji do rong kerma ra gwan jana. Ta kama ni san ro de zo ji nyan da ku tin di xin na ya long de zo tin da xie. Tani wo ma de gam tin di xin na. De ya bo yo ra.
Especially if you're at home or in your own room where you're just meditating by yourself, then you're quite free to do this. You can have your 4 or 5 minutes accurate meditation, then you can really jiggle about and loosen up and have a good break and then sit down for the next 5 accurate minutes.
Tani ngaro ka tena kama nga da wo ji uni gong thang ge ji yo na wo zo ya bo na yi re nga tu ten du ti uni kama nga zo yong thung thung da wo ji re ti uni hya ka son no to na kama nga ti do la gong je tha se li la bo ma re no to lo be ra pa mo bo du cha ba mo bo du no to la cha ro mo bo yo re ti ri yin ti la no to ra pa ni me na yong no to cha ba ga ji kama nga la du ga na ngaro so li la bo ma re no to cha ba ta ta ga ti ni mo bo yo re ti ti ga uni kama nga ga ti do la ya bo ji ga na li la bo mo du nga ten du tong bo.
So the target should be, in that case then, 5 minutes of good quality shamatha. And this may not sound like much, but it's a lot. It's quite an achievement. It's already pretty good if you can do that, because what count as distractions from simply resting the mind with the object are thoughts. And there are gross thoughts, and there are subtle thoughts. And actually, when we take a 5-minute time period to spend 5 minutes where the mind has been able to settle with the object without being pulled away by the heavy thoughts, the gross ones, or without being distracted by the subtle background thoughts, that's already pretty good when we look at it in reality, in the practice.
Tani de zo ji gong de ya bon da wo kama nga ta non do me kha kho chi chona ya bo chi thana tani kama du da wo xie kama ya no tani ma so ji kama yo da wo xie ma nyu ji tani yo gong ji de yo de so ji mo xie du jian le ma so ji de qin nyu xie de rong rong du pa la song no dong san de gong ta ma de la song no ya bo ji dong tani ma gong bi tu so de tong re dong gong bi tu so de ri re dong de de li xie ge du de kama nga se ji de pa chen ra wo ta de song no dong ge de me kama ri ta de li de de na pe sen de che bon da wo ji no tu cuo re mo ji ma tu pa nyu ji chua ma du pa je ta de ri da wo ji song ji da wo ji song no dong ge de ma ni ti che ge na yo de kama da la wo re ta kama la ta du ge na no tu mo bu chu le wo de ri ma yin ba.
Once that's achieved, and there really are 5 minutes where the mind has been settled with its object and not distracted by the thoughts, then one can extend that to become 6 minutes and maybe reduce the break time from 5 to 4. So then you've got a 6 to 4 relationship of meditation and break. This is something that needs to be done in terms of the reality of one's practice, so that when you find that 5 minutes can be achieved comfortably each time, then that's the time to stretch it to 6 or to 7. And if you find that the break of 5 doesn't need to be 5, that 4 is okay, then that's when it needs to be reduced to 4. So step by step, one can be increasing the practice so that the time of absorption, the time of settled mind is longer. And Rinpoche thinks that about 5 minutes is a good way to start. But sort of 5 minutes. This doesn't mean sitting looking at your watch every 10 seconds to see that. That's 3.5 minutes. There's nothing at all like that. Sort of 5 minutes. Give yourself that sort of a time as a target, and but not with a stopwatch or something ticking away on the side, so that it's exactly. It's a guideline.
Tini ta gamje ta tini sedi telana kama nga ta tini ru chadila no to la kari tena ten chu pa ma ko ba ko ten de chu ta ten ge chu kari tena ten ge chu ya ta ko je ten jo ni ten do bo ten jo ni ten do mo ten jo ni ten pe ho ten jo ni kari ten ga na ko ro ten chu kama nga ji la ta ma so ra kama nga la gam kama nga la ma so tini sera tiditera ko ten ko ro ten chu ta ko ro ya ten ta ko ro je re jo ne ya re chu ko ro pa ten ge se chu
kamanga kitanda de drenche yomare
kamanga hakera ganje gara muni content de tenje ni amani mi patala de gundu tini kamanga redulana ta ko ni ya ten ta joro ga se tenjo ne tenje si rong la ne tini ten ge se.
So what we're aiming for in those 5 minutes is 5 minutes where mind's fabrications, thoughts, haven't distracted one from the simple focus, whatever it may be. So this means thinking about your friends, thinking about money or financial things or other circumstances. These are the distractions. These are mind's fabrications, and the 5 minutes we're aiming for is 5 minutes without distraction by those things.
Yenayo no to the pe du jo ji re ta de ma chin na de ho re de ji gwa na de ru xie ma re no to the pe du jo re ta nga de ji mo nyan do gwa ja na mo bo de ho re ta ngo ni ta ko re de ji hu ta ko de la na ho ko de ru xie ma re ha ko so be no to du jo ji re ko de ma chin na de ho re ta ko de ji gwa na ko ho de ru xie ma re.
Thoughts aren't nice. They're wicked. Because when you don't want to think of them and you don't want them to come, and all the more of them come. That's not right. They come even the more. Even more of them come, or whatever it is. Anyway, they're tricky, so that you don't want them, but the fact of not wanting them doesn't stop them, and sometimes the very fact of wishing they weren't there makes them come even more strongly. I think that's it.
Tena ngaro ta gong ji le kong te ma ni a te go na yo te mo bo te go du. Ta ke za be ka le di. Ta ja ya ko ro te ti te ga na. Ho ko ro du wo te ro che ma ni. Ho te go du. Te ko te ma du. Be na dong bo ta ga gong ji ya po xie ga te na. O te mo bo te go du. Ta ya ko te na te ta ko te chi ko te na. Yo ko te ro xie ma du ko tin du du. Da pena no gomjera ta nga te chi mne kong te mne ni pa ya po chi te go te na pe mo bo te go du te ni no to mo ro du ya ta cho ko te chu ya ta te chu ndi de cho te na ndi du choro na to la te na ndi du ya ta choro te ndi che na ko ro te ro che mo du ko ndu du na to no to ndu du ni ro du ko te ji go na ko li la bo re mo du ko te ro che mo du ko te ma che na te ko du e ke san ro ga ba da ji yo de.
So if when we sit and we meditate we're thinking of attaining some state undisturbed by thoughts, then that's almost guaranteed to make the thoughts come. Whereas if our attitude when we sit down to meditate is, oh, well, if they come, not bothered, then that very attitude tends to help them not to come. So if you feel it doesn't matter, they come, they don't come, they don't come, they'll tend to diminish. Whereas if we think, I've got to meditate without any thought coming in and to concentrate on the object, you can guarantee that will stimulate lots of thoughts to come.
당이 배지가 나도 다 강동다. 배지가나 배나다 니노니 단디 조제를 모모도야. 더파 종화시 야요 단디 공용문디. 고스카송아 만데 고카송아 파야 보지야. 단디라 아마지 되요나. 콜라 버거 충충치. 단로 영하제 저 버거 줘나. 다티 아마도 니디디디라나 아마도 가로 공캔다 그래. 버거 지오래. 버거 등하로 농동다 그래. 농동 배당이 배요래. 다 드지거나 버거도 눈이만 어이거나 아마디 오 단디 버거도 이 두저레노 냠바레서 농동 싫어 문디. 가레디는 니라나 배 사동만디 야본디. 전다원 성산다라 공공문디. 근데 이나는 디 버거도 코로티니 야지 마지 때문이다. 아마 코로 통데레디 다 버거도 제레노 가레디 센터 메바다 센터 문디 채노라. 디 당에 말이노 저 딘디 센터 공메레 고다 롱가 지코로 다 디지마도 다 론디라 텐지마도 달라 센터다 오면디 된다고지. 나도도 코로 로본다고 파이가근디. 그 센터 메바다고지. 되니 배나 다 니라는 현자고도 전자고도 되니 뭐보요나 다 버거도 야주 마주나 아마디 버거 마지엔로 다가리 제리엔로 치마다 수유로 다 디저리엔로 소 띠나 베 듬보다고 저자 구구라죠 다 센터베 해와를 세나 된다고 지레소나 고리야 보지면도 들이니라 알아서 나도도 로보다고 이조고 다다 버가라 센터 메비가 소노 동동진이야 나도 드니 버가라 센터 요비가 소노 동동진이야 나도 뭐야 드니도 센터 요비가 소노 동동다고 뭐지 봐고 센터 메바가 소노 동동다고 지시니 나도도 파 키레 거용 먹어 키레 로용 먹어 그럼 히 장진다고 지시가 나도도 이거나 드니 대 저기 대본다고 지 대 저기 로보다고 전도래 대 답은 많이 봐 배나 버거도 다 지 마시엔로 청샤푸은로 송아지고 센단다고 지고 송노 동동시나 베나마게 청샤 몸보다고 연나 버거 주소나 다 버거 된 상수은로 마리엔로 시 아마라 센다봉보 노도레 오마레 된다고 땅아 노도 몸보레 오 가리제 오 송달라베 센단다고 지시 감텐디 자나는 가야 보고만디 된디 시나 가냐만디 된디 시디라 센 로보시 센다 메바 코롱 롱가 코롱 파 로도 고 가레 주데나 코롱도 지가 봤다 된디 제가는 된 세아데 데본다고 지도 간데 야본다고 지 좋아도 다 많이 봐 땅아 나도 도 좋아라고 달래 지면야 베센다고 지세 된디 소지 간나 된디 간데 두르두르 도지도 된디 마로 세아라용 데보메 봐 된디 간 야보 마셔 봐 된디 제도
If we take an analogy for this, then Rinpoche is making the analogy of a mother and a child, and in a place like here, in this temple. So imagine we cleared away all the fragile, delicate stuff that's here and there, all the breakables, and that we closed the doors, or the mother closed the doors. Then mother could be sitting there where Rinpoche is sitting, and the child could be left to wander around, to crawl around the temple, and there wouldn't be any danger. The doors are shut, the child's not going to wander off, is within view all the time, can't break anything because all the breakable things have been tidied away. So then the mother can just sit quite comfortably, and although keeping an eye on the child, there's no need to really worry too much, because there's not too much that can go wrong, and the child's inside. And this is so in this analogy, the mother is like your meditator's mind, and then the child is like thoughts, and wandering thoughts. So that's one possibility. If, however, there's a feeling, there's total anxiety all the time. Where's the child now? What's it doing? Are you going to break this? Or there's something that's crystal over the glass. It's going to be broken. smash the tormers or set off the fire alarms or, whatever it might be, if there's constant anxiety every moment that something's going to be damaged, that the child's going to be in danger, then the mother's just going to become a bag of nerves, and it's not very good. So if we take that analogy for the actual practice, if we don't have the feeling that our meditation is this precious thing that can be shattered at any moment by thoughts, and if we're thinking all the time of thoughts as an enemy that will destroy it, and so on and so forth, then we're going to sit in a state of tension, in a state of discomfort and anxiety. Whereas if we have the attitude, like the first attitude of the mother, where we're totally relaxed about it. Okay, if thoughts come, let them go. Anyway, they can't do any damage. And our main job, while this child of thought is wandering around the temple of our awareness, our main job is to stay with the meditation focus, no problem. Then this will be a much more comfortable, a much happier way, a much more relaxed way, and a much more effective way of meditating. So these are some of the main points to bear in mind when we're doing shamatha meditation using an object. And although there are many types of objects which are described, this advice applies to all of them. So we've seen we can use a pebble or a small piece of wood, but again, Rinpoche is emphasizing that when we do use an object, smaller is better. And then once we have that object, then what we do with the mind, as he's just described, this attitude towards thoughts and practicing for short periods, these are the main points of advice. These are the main points of advice for developing shamatha. This is red light district of Samilan.
Police will get some. Can you see?
This is advice for the cultivation of shamatha, which means a peaceful, stably settled mind. But as Rinpoche said yesterday, shamatha in itself is only something of provisional or temporary benefit. It's not the ultimate benefit. It's something that many faiths or people do to concentrate the mind. The ultimate benefit comes from insight meditation, vipassana. And the reason we are cultivating shamatha, this settled, peaceful mind, is because then this becomes the foundation for developing insight into the mind, which is the shamatha, which gives us the high benefit that we are looking for.
라마라 소완데 드니오 라마도 롱생 이메시에 드니오 마추바디나라 타마지 키바제 다 가송 이거 다 지게야 이거지도 디 요다 거라요 대조건지 드니오 미바디가라 소바카리 때가나요 때때 다 레동부비가세나나 몽치아다 미바 우포지라네 때리 때조지 요슈레 드니 까까라나 더 코나용 디먼디 까까라용 대조지 마치빙오 요히다 너도 공용 초모제 공용마데 바롱가 히 임빙오라나 건제 드니오 미바디가라티 따따 따리무 제그드.
As we do the practice session, then we should organize it so that it really brings the best out of our shamatha practice. And as Rinpoche explained yesterday, then this means from time to time we stop and we do prayers to our guru, prayers to the lineage. From time to time we either receive the empowerments or imagine the guru dissolves into us and we receive the blessing. And then also from time to time, even though our main focus may be this pebble or small piece of wood, from time to time, even if we're mainly doing that because we're beginners, we can also try to do that first king of techniques that was taught yesterday, whereby just whatever comes up in the mind in the present moment, whatever thought, whatever activity, whatever it is, becomes the focus of meditation for that instant. In general, for beginners, it's found that using a small object like a small stone is a very, very useful way to start. But even if we're starting like that, then we need to make small sessions with these breaks for devotion, blessing, and some moments of that ultimate meditation of all, where whatever's in the mind in the moment becomes its focal point.
Then tata mipa ta te so mandapa ndu yana yong ta tongbu mipa nipa mipa samba mipa si sera mandu goran je mandu ta kari ngarong mipa tian gdu mipa tian sanana cheba je mandu pena ngarong ne nanana mya je bo yin na yin ngamo yin na yin kawa yin na yin zo ta ne chwa ka bare ne chwa cha kari te zo mya la ta nga ma nga je ma ji te zo phun jin de yan na yong zo ta mya la ma ri ne la so no tong ka re ne chwa cha de kari pe ten da wo re zo ta mi pa la yong zo ngan da wo dong mi pa la te zo ma ra ban du yan na yong zo san ni ka bare san ni ge de la na mi pa la dong bu mi pa ni mi pa sam bu mi pa me ko rong ji ko ro me pa ta kari ge ni le thwa na kha thwa de no na ne pe so dong du.
In the texts, actually, we often find quite a series of shamatha meditations using different types of focus, different types of mind anchor. And there is no order to these. There is not one that then you move on to the better one, then you move on to the even better one. There is no order of quality in these. They are just different types of ways of focusing the mind. And what matters is that the mind is settled. So from that point of view, any of these focuses has the same value as another one. It's the different focuses are there to help concentration in different ways, very much as different types of medicine are there to treat different sicknesses. We can't say this medicine is better than that medicine, or this is even better medicine. Whichever medicine is there is good because it treats the particular sickness with God. So these different types of anchor for the awareness can have their own particular qualities, but in themselves it's not a question of one is of more value than another. It's a question that they help us in different areas.
Tuni hini gonanda, lantong gonanda, ta zo yununi zo ta san yore, ta bei ga chere, menga jenara, ta jenara, no ba san yore, ta de yin ji mian ya bu ji de ha go, ya bu ji hi.
Whether we're doing this shamatha, stabilizing the mind, or vipassana, insight meditation, whichever one of those practices we are engaged in, there are three factors which are of vital importance in meditation and that we really ought to know.
다 가린다고 지오레라나 감제들라 용면나 너도베 뭐뭐 너도베 토이 뒤서 끼오레 용면나 너도 먼저바베 무판다고 녀다 그 가리 가이 공이 뭐기바 만테신다고 로이 뒤서 끼오레 용면나 다지 무바 용만 토아 용만 니샤 야보요 비뒤서 끼디 뒤서라고 써 다 감제나 다 맞아도 모노시주나 뭐보여지레데 또 수두거나 non to pay troi tuji non to manto ma manda ku nyama ku me na yon ji gare kong ye me ki ban da wo mu ban da wo ji sung yi tu so ji de ni san ya bo ni pi tu so ji de da san da wo ji re.
There are three situations of meditation. One is where the mind is we say troubled, disturbed, harassed by many different thoughts. Another is where the mind is sunken in torpor or in sleepiness or in dullness. And a third is when the mind is well settled.
Tani ta de la na mengo san yo re gong ta. Ta no tong cho be mo bo ji jam tin ri de de la na. San zhen dian ni men nian re san za za xi. San ga se yin lo ge re. Lo bu xie ge re. No to be mo bo zhen di ga sa la. Ta dian zi do jie jie de gang qi jie se de ge wa re de. San de ga ge ge na mi lo ge wa re. Lo pa ge wa re.
So the advice for those three situations is as follows. First, when the mind is very active, very busily distracted with thought, then rather than trying to tightly, through tightness and discipline, to get rid of the thoughts, the advice in that case is to relax, to learn how to relax, to make the mind much more loose and comfortable.
Tuni na tu mu pan dawo ji su nyen da ku de me na yo ga ye ko de me hin dawo den ji re so na ga di la pe dran ga ba re pe za za gu gu zo pe dran ni ga je ga ba re.
Then the second circumstance, when the mind has sunk into torpor, thickness, heaviness, then there are instructions or counsel about how to tighten up the mind, how to wake it up, how to bring it back into shape, how to straighten it up.
Tani ta ya bo da wo gong yo na ti ka se ni ko che do zhen den ba ji ro ha ya ge ba re wo zhen yong ma che ba lo yong ma che ba.
And then in the third circumstance, when the meditation is going as intended, then one needs to avoid any corrective methods, any effort of relaxation or tightening.
So not to chun chong re be lo che so na nyen da ku mu pa cho gai ko me ba ma chong do re.
If the meditation is working as intended and we do the sort of things we do to tighten up, to straighten up the mind, then this gives rise to more and more thoughts. If, when the meditation is going as intended, we apply the advice for relaxing the mind, then actually we'll tend more towards torpor and haziness.
Then not to pay mombo go, not to pay for Tinjika in Gojo Zaza, Drangwana. Then not to one position. Then maybe on the Tinola, Hindra with Jimpong and make chair do it. Be drisi dran tindisi gona te nongtung choro semade ba cho kali cher ndo ware te na korong pa lo ni lo de yo gona te nongtu ma ndu ware pe na nyu ma dawo ji gona yusi yule te doma cho mara ko yo gona te ma doma cho mara pe den da ware nongtu pe mo cho de te la za so dang gam ni za na te ni nongtu mo ro jin dawo jian dawo ji ji ro phan ba man du Teni korong ma lobo zo pa yo adata ma lo gona teni no to ma korong ma nyu pe lobo zo ndu ware.
If when the mind is very busy and agitated with thoughts, if we try to correct that through discipline, through being strict and tight with the mind, in order to bring it into line, then it produces the contrary effect. It in fact encourages just more and more and even more thoughts. It's a bit like if there was agitated water, then in an effort to settle it, you're picking it up and trying to do something to make it calm and flat. So the thing to do when the mind is very busy with thoughts is not to, in a tight way, to try and do something that counteracts the thoughts. On the contrary, it's to learn how to relax it out of that busyness and distractedness. So that's right, learning how to place the water container down, and bit by bit it settles into calmness all by itself.
Tuni sen mu pa ro cho sen ma nyon ra ku ti teni yo na teni ma za zo ma de na pa lo bo yo na teni nyu ku teni gong ten me ba cho do re pa me lo to lo yo me ba cho do re ti na ti ka se le na lo nya ma ti ka se na sa gu zu zhang ge zu zhang na teni de zu dong ni teni wo gong zu chao de.
If when the mind is already getting hazy and sleepy and vague and tired, if we apply the methods of relaxation, then it's just going to get even more hazy and tired, and you'll probably fall asleep or lose the meditation totally. So that's not to be done either.
Ta te kari se ge ro nong to la ta gare de me ta choro ta de ji se ji mo du je wa je do ro nong to lo pe ka se le kari zo gong ge ta ji ni pe ka se le kari nda wo ji ta ro la song dong ge du.
So of course this is something that only each of us can know within the practice and come to learn to recognize when our mental activity is overexcited, or when it's becoming sluggish, or when it's just right.
Tuni shisha ta gong chu de la no lama do lo ma ni zwa ti na che gong de chge yin ba re mu ni che cha che na ti da ga ro so je la mi yin ji xi men lo mi po ke xi men de ho ya ti so yo me re ra tuni se gong de che cha se gong de ti so do che me re de me 로미 땅아 도반데 좀 다초론데 저 강시 파 코로 또파도 야니 코로니 저바티네시니 강제 거바리 요히들이 이면 단들이 좀 마치 드디디라 다 요요가 맞춰마 요도 되이라 기체체 처거나 대조지 척하고 요 말 가리드나 마타지 농동 초동자 요 바마리 손노 동동자 요 바마리 더 만라나 다 시샤 그 기체가 마도 그 되이 우니 다 로로로라 네데 만진다고 쳤다기요 봐 말이 손지라지나 다 말이래라 코로 깨지기디도니 som바다다 천도터레디 더는 나라니 바메레 더니 다시 샤다고 저 틀리마도 대이 저 타지면디 이마 해차시나 다 조롱 강처세디 코로 나도 가리 또 나간데리 지레고디 와 다초들이 제시 온코로가 와 당한데리 나도 하던데리 레도 다 촌데리 저 강시 다 데리 저 천수나 드니 요히 다 문이도 다 저동도 데리레.
Actually, when it comes to meditation instruction, to learning meditation, then the ideal circumstance, or how it should be done, is in a one-to-one dialogue with a good meditation teacher. And Rinpoche says he's he's here, he doesn't understand English, you don't understand Tibetan, time's very limited, and so these instructions, it's very sort of general public instruction about meditation. But when meditation, if we really want to further the practice and deepen it, then the practice brings up questions, it brings up situations, and then these situations we go to our meditation teacher and explain them, they give us advice. On the basis of that advice we practice some more and they come back with the answers, or it's an ongoing dialogue. And people are very different, the way people's minds work. Some busy, less busy, the mental activity, what comes up in their practice varies so much from person to person that it needs to be on that one-to-one basis. And then Rinpoche says, when it's the Buddha teaching, because of the Buddha's most perfect mind, then the Buddha's presence makes each person hear and receive the teachings totally suited to their own case, in their own language. Unfortunately, it's not like that just now, so this has to be a very general teaching about the main points of meditation. But to say that really the way it should work is as an ongoing apprenticeship with a good teacher. So we'll leave the teaching on the Mahamudra text there for just now, and that gives us a little time to go on with the text on the vows and commitments. tanga gari songale si kita tensin ro di se ji me kale ka wara ra ni ga ji de ji na de ji me re de ina na donka mo mo di ka so jesan yu ta mo ni de ge se ga don ba ga se de jesan ke re di zhong de ta xian la lu la lian ji dong de ni xian la yo ji de ji ru ji se he ji in the previous day's teachings on the precepts, then we looked at the layperson's precepts and at the main categories of the novice's precepts. And whichever one of these you happen to be keeping, it's very good that you know those precepts by heart, because this is actually what you're supposed to be living every day. And depending whichever of those levels it happens to be, then there's no point having them written down on a piece of paper or in a book somewhere, so that if you have to think, what am I supposed to do about this? And then it's written down or you can't find it, that's absolutely useless. When it's a commitment that we've taken to live by, then one needs to know that by heart. One needs to be able to run through all the different points of the commitments that one's taken very clearly in the mind.
도나는 김배용 향이 그 담바 돈만 보고 봐 몸보송 거래 대인들라 도나는 개향 돈바 땡땡지고 향이 양로 잼비 돈만 보나 리바리 개냐 또 개서 그 돈바다 도나는 개흥란 혀거래 되면 개냐 산이 개냐 해주면도 야 개서도 genyan nisha de genlu la domba hyogare
Genyan dang getsula.
genlu kanoni domba hyogare nyanyi yanlo je pandawo kina genyan sani hyunan dire gesa sani hyunan dire genlu sani hyunan ya ta on tombora.
The vows that we had yesterday, day before, if you observe the 8 lay precepts, then you can be called an upasaka. That is to say, I think in some texts they translate it as a venerable lay practitioner. But anyway, the name upasaka does apply. Now, there are different views on this within Buddhism. There are different ordination traditions stemming from the early traditions in India. There's the Sthaviravadins, there are the Sarvastivadins, traditions of understanding the vows. There are those developed by the Vaibhashika, there are those developed by the Sautrantika traditions. They have different ways of understanding this, and they don't all agree about where this word, this term upasaka, applies. It's really quite complicated, but as far as we're concerned, if a lay person is observing those 8 lay precepts, then they merit the name the upasaka, the person who is close to virtue. And then that is a basis for going on to the novice ordination. And the novice ordination, although its name doesn't mean that in Tibetan, in the English it really puts its finger on the point that although there are those 33 rules we had yesterday of the novice ordination, they're the precepts that you are bound to follow, although at the same time you're trying to follow the vows of a full monk, of a fully ordained person. So one's trying to practice those, although there isn't the commitment to stay by them. But of course that is the highest form of commitment to self-liberation.
Deni da getse do on the sosa damba tung de dong deni na shongchi chenji damba ya deni na ho ge damba ge ti zhong de zha hela ya bu ji de lo la lan ru ka zwa bi ga chi bo re ma ru so damba san ka hyu yo re hyu na damba de gari gari mu ni ha ko ge du be ga chen du de jing la nga ro so ran cho pan so de ji 초가지 로레는 시지치레 문디 니가친디 가르레제나 너 가로서 dombasan 라디티라나 다 너는 녀랭 짜반다고 쳐디오라 데인디티라나 데 dombasan 휴오디티라나 dom바가리 kin디 마히나 빼 타줘보 빼 ngo차보 문이레디오레 마마라 까dom비 라마게위키냐지 그 까나라 게누지 홍레 게누 빼 가제치보지 온디테라나 디 라마티 따추 페샤타 뉴라디티라 따 페샤페 모모타 뉴제 게누디야 가동피 라마탈라 휴레 야 드니 찬야제 조냐제 말고 냥코 조지제 가레레제 드와고레 가동피 게시네 드니 코론소 안오지 동디테라 야 찬야제 조냐제 드니 까마바 캬만도 안디 캬노 또 조지레제 코론고 게기냐타라 야 량자리 드니 코로고 예세년코 와지니 파제니 드니 디디테라나 까마바 샤마노니 베케로치 보인디 테라나 코로 냐유차라 파자거리 베텐차오지 마로서 저로서 domba송제 가르레 라나 세 코로 드니라고 쳐서리
whichever of these commitments we take, so within the pratimoksha, the lay commitments, the novice, the full ordination, or then in the Mahayana, the bodhisattva vow, or in the Vajrayana, the various tantric commitments, whichever we've taken, it is really very, very important that we understand the commitments we've undertaken, and that we know them very well, that we know them by heart. Because those commitments, in whichever case it is, are the very foundation for all of the practice that follows. They're the basis for what we do in the practice as individuals or in the community together. And not to know them is both injurious to the practice and it's what we could call a reason for shame. It's one should be embarrassed not to know them, or one should feel it's shameful not to know the commitments that one's supposed to be committed to. So it's no good taking a certain level of ordination or of lay precepts, and you've sort of taken them, but you don't know what it is. That's no good at all. We should know, and there's and not just assume it or pretend it. And Rinpoche is telling a story from the early days in the Kadampa tradition of a lama and a student, and there the logic dikinangla the gaja champu ken de lomare lama
mare genu ji le mare ti lama de kanala gaja chibo ji genu ji le ondu chu gari se yo ji nga pesha mombota khipa yilare tin khipa indi dela chuetani nyangkha chuji gari re je twa ko di dela na chanya je tonya je chainya ba je tonya ba je to jiru re no tani ko nyese nyinko ba si to chuji ra nguni se na te ko nyese nyinko ba de je su tu디 코소노 지도나 까마바 샤마노니 베게로 치고 총 까마바 샤마노니 그 주지에 되고 냐위 잘하는 까마바 샤마노니 저거래 왜 던다고 쳐나 근데 베 줘버라 근데 많이 봐 동카다다 야보지히 다다시나 되니 야본두.
So then it's a story of in the early Kadampa tradition. There's one bhikkhu, one monk who comes along, and he's a very proud monk, and he gives the impression of being very, very learned. But when he's questioned by one of the Kadampa lamas about what are the 18 hells, states of hell, then he goes through them, but then by the time he's got to 16, he can't remember the other two. And so then he makes up two hells of the the black hat hell and the red hat hell for those who've broken their commitments to the Karmapas. He just makes something up. And as a result of making something up, he himself was reborn in the hell states afterwards. This is the story. So, although in one way it might not seem much because he couldn't remember the list, because of actually what he was doing, which was the pretending, the lying, the deception, the ignorance and so on, all of that contributed to a very, very miserable rebirth. So this is quite a vivid story, but it does show the need for when there is something that's important to our life and practice, such as the precepts, one should really be able to just list them off, rattle them off as a list like that.
다디 domba 요바디 다 domba 가리시 메바시 다디리 domba 메바 차도도 고지게니 다더 가리리 되나노 다 domba 동제 되는 다시 샤기 제거디나노 domba 판나 domba 동로 와리 domba 야 파이거나 야 더니노 현나 domba 동로 와리
So then, having taken those precepts, how can they be lost? Well, one way that they can be lost is if they are offered back, is the terms. If you give up your vows officially, that's one way. They are also, these pratimoksha vows, they are lost automatically at death. That's the second way.
더니는 domba 퍼제더 다 domba 효화도 domba 퍼하니 대조지 domba 퍼나야 보여 봐래 레디 domba pana용 니파 메바 임바 말이 가르레라나는 땅아 몽코 이지나 추봉hul이라고 쳐로 효바리 데바 켐모 효바리 달라요 이마오 domba 메반라고 어디 니파 메반라고 되니 말이 옛나요 땅아로서 domba 효와도 domba 팔리 야 파나 domba 파나 편도 지고래 domba 마파니 domba 효나 동아비 몽봉조래 비나个些比个动画机，起码了个些呢用动画你个生些呢动画生个一些呢动画这起码了用嘞，动画我你拍差呢，得拍到了动画用嘛嘞，等于那用片头有啥用嘞你把切啥了切嘞，也那用打片头你把你咖喱摸嘞了呢，片头摸嘞，等于那呢动画拍呢得做也不用嘞，等于那动画用拍差的得动画没把抢着嘞。
Of those two, then, it's not of those two. It's if we take the first one, which is giving back the vows, then this is preferable to breaking the vows. It is much more beneficial to formally give back the vows through the correct ceremony or procedure than it is simply to let them lapse and break them. And the reason for this, so both of them are not, they're not ideal things to do, they're not good things to do. Both of them come with negative consequences of some sort, because one's given up something that was very helpful. But of the two, it is much more beneficial if somebody recognizes that there is a danger, or that they know they're going to break the vows. They can't keep the vows anyway, then it's much better to formally give them back, because then that time of vow holding has finished and they've been renounced. Whereas if they're broken, they'll be broken by one action, and then this will lead on to something else, there'll be another action and another action, because one hasn't officially given them back, then you have one injury after another, one breaking away after another, whereas to give them back is cleanly to finish it, and then one's in a different state of being. Then the second case is when one dies. When we take the vows, actually they're taken from this moment until the moment of death. So that is the actual length of the commitment, which means that when you die, automatically that particular time period of that you're committed to, that you promised, pledged, has finished, and the vow lapses.
라드중이 domba 디리거 소동 든지 배셔놓라 요 말에 디소한다고도 든지 요 말에 든지 든지 가르쳐 거르지나 다 너는 제 마음부시 봐도 혀마수지 봐도 domba 내지 마도 든지 로기니 로가티시 든지 그 domba 메레 얘나요 대바 옌바 베나 우스 gemse 보고사 든지 그 대바라 로기 로니 든지라 domba 해지고 바래 요디 테라나 요파마위 데라 요파마리디 데바 예라 요비샤나나 더용 휴나용 문디 바인지 말이 가르리지나 내가 송지 전에 니거 송가리 루소만다 바리디 보고 루소라 문이 건더바 노라 디 루소 요파마리 더용 데도 희근디 되면 보고 건더바 노라 요파마위 데다 볼라 다 요지 그 볼라 빼샤 요지 그 노라 어디 문디 되면 더용 데도지 하고 그 가르리라나 다 나주니 로지 로니 로가다 아니 잡아 든지 신디와 든지 이나용 딱가리 진디 대종 고마신 고마주나 대조지 괜찮다고 쳐래 되는 요밤하이 매나요 니대대블루 또 단도는 루겐바 라요도 이산디 더 홍가와 메바용 키근디 대용 요밤하이 루용 멤버 보고 루용 멤버용 더용 하고도
In the Tibetan tradition, the transmission from India of the precepts came through one of the lineages which is called the Sarvastivadin. And the Sarvastivadin was one of the 18 original transmissions of the Vinaya. And there are 18 original transmissions. 4 of them were very widespread and had a great influence. The one that went to Tibet was I keep forgetting it, Sarvastivadin one. Now actually in the Sarvastivadin tradition, these vows are taken from the moment of the ceremony until death. That's the only way that the novice and the full ordination vows are taken. And there is no tradition within the Sarvastivadin of taking them for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, for some defined time period. But within the other main traditions of India, and in particular in this Thavira Vadin tradition, which exists these days as the Theravadin tradition. Theravadin is one branch of the Stavira-Vadin tradition. Then in that there is the lineage from the Buddha time of taking the vows for a prescribed time period, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And although it's not a major point, it's important to know this because in the West many people take their vows for a defined time period, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So it's good to be aware of that, because if one day you find that in the Tibetan tradition, which was all based on the Sarvastivadin, there is no lineage of taking those vows for that time, then it might cause a lot of doubt and worry, and there's no need, because this is a very valid tradition from the very earliest days of Buddhist ordination. It's just that that particular lineage of transmission didn't go to the mainstream Tibet.
Teni geta che naung domba tongwa siare geta che denana ta legendary osam de uni so de ta lo ta che bo siena teni domba me ba chen lo are to.
There is one thing that immediately destroys the vows, because we're looking at how you lose them. This is also for giving them up, giving them back, or they're lost at death. When one renounces belief in karma, cause and effect, this automatically loses the vows immediately.
Teni zawa yenju na yo doma tong ro are so ji ba ma sin ba le ba mo so ba mo ju la me zhen zawa ye wa zawa ye shu na ta ga re shu na yo no na mo doma me ba chang ro yo bare.
When there is a full breakage of one of the 4 root precepts, not to murder, remember we had yesterday not to murder a human being, not to kill, not to steal, not to commit sexual misconduct, not to lie, the full breakage of any one of those causes immediate loss of the ordination.
Ta ta dong ji dong no mo bo de ta zo ta ta re. Tani na ta domba tong sa me pa chen na na ta ga re xie go ya so chu mo chu le son no dong na.
So there are a lot of details about what causes the vows to be lost. When we enter into them, it's quite vast, but what Rinpoche has just told us, these are the main points about how the vows are lost. But then on the contrary, once one's taken these precepts, how to nurture them.
Ta tena na la pa phun da wo go na mo dong ba ya che chu re. Tani ngaroso domba zaba yinjungi ka asalin chasen jinanda songjik chasen jinar ko hakundwa chasen cha la nan hiemanya songjik chasen domba 동시 ngamari 전주 또 chasen 신나요 teni domba ya so chumun chasen menana domba ya hinan dindu.
So then one needs to know how to nurture the vows, but then if the vows have been damaged, one needs to know how to restore them.
Mari. Chasenlana, Chapisenlana, Tanga, Hiemanyan, Yan, Korosenlana, Gong.
Oh, also.
Muni Bigo. Penanga Sujina, Mutila Kuchumanyan, Kushina, Jasajatama Chasenura, Yana Kochumara, the Chasen Dinada, Sembajura, Domba Chui Gazala, Domba Tui Gazala, Chasen Yona, the Domba Yasu Chumundu, Chasen Mena, Domba Yasu Chure.
Sorry, that's wrong. It's when there has been a breakage or an offence, then very often that offence can be remedied, it can be repaired, if the offence is admitted to immediately, if it's confessed immediately to the other Sangha. If it's concealed, then it's lost. So this concealment or revealing of an offence is a vital factor in its ability to be repaired or the fact that it's lost.
Tani ta so maruma te thanje la tan joba sin ni hyoba phi tin di se din na tani ji tongwa te ta pan do thari hyoba sin na tongwa te ni ba te ta hyoba sin tin di se ga ni ba do thari yana yung dong ba ya hye na dong ba tho mun di tongwa jong cha ba cha sen si wa na dong ba ya hye na dong ba tho mun di yana yung tongwa 니바요라 디바 파숑아 셰데 혀바 셰 어야 풍보스 민도 넘 다든지 셰나 혀비 디바 더 던디 얘나요 dom바야 혀거나 혀주문디
dom바야
야 혀거나 베나가 라마셰 용 첨바셰 용 라마셰거나 셰주문디 차센요나
So then, if the vow has been damaged and it's not concealed, then the next step is to confess it, to reveal that, and then to go through a formal purification. So this could be like the reading of the Three Heaps Sutra or confession. That's it.
다 대차라 대조 포모가 예바도 대차 문답아 요래 대 알아서 해자시에 가나 대소 뭐니.
So they're the main points about if something has gone somewhat wrong, how to repair it, how to keep the vows if something is going wrong but not disastrously wrong.
되니다 배워너 다 가리라는 노나노 송지 셈바동 호 dom바통지 그 자바도 수수다발라 디디오리 디히레 데인디디라나 자바야나 다 배워 치보지요 바 히마고 바라고 쳐디오 바라 베나 사긴라고 지레 로도라서 바카리 시가나 사면은 시용사면디 데이나는 어디야 통지 그 자바도 저른제 저런 노니 자바도 다 수수다바 인디디라나 노나노 배워 송지마 자바레 노나노 니가라 녀모 바통지 더 다도 용 타바 더니나 냐투 롱자 다 디지고 공부토르도 다 디지나라용 노시레 오만다바 모모도 딘도나 다좀비 공부토지 소다 이거시나 더니 대바 전부 소다라고 이나는 더니 중지 셈바라서 송지 토지 전로와레 더니 대면 소다라고 이나 노나 냐투 공부토지레.
The benefits of the vows are that these pratimoksha vows of self-liberation, are the very foundation of all of the Buddhist work which follows, whether it be within the basic Buddhism or Hinayana Buddhism, whether the Pratimoksha vows are the basis for whatever one does as a bodhisattva. In any level of Buddhism, the very foundation for what we do is right conduct, and the very essence of right conduct is this committing the mind to good action and to the avoiding of negative action. So all goodness comes out of these, just like the crops come out of the earth, and if there's no earth, there can't be any crops and harvest. In the same way, without these vows, one or another of these categories of vows of self-liberation, then none of the harvest of the other results can come. As far as the results themselves are concerned, then within Hinayana Buddhism, these vows as right conduct serve as the basis for the practice which brings the states of various stages of fruition, of non-returner, one-time returner, non-returner, arhat, shravaka arhats, other sorts of arhats. And then within the Mahayana, the Pratimoksha vows are the very basis for bodhisattva conduct, and the fruition of that is Buddhahood itself. So, although it has been very brief, we will leave our study of the Pratimoksha vows there, and in this afternoon's session, we can go on to look at the Bodhisattva vows.
동보 사제 과정이라고도 대서 nga jichu gu so jichu de tu so de 가르라나나 두소 마도니 파 동르로 그 두소.
So Rinpoche has picked bits and pieces from here and there in this vast text that is the topic of this course. There just isn't the time to go through it systematically. There's not even a fraction of the time to do that. So then Rinpoche invites your questions. Yes.
Can I ask two questions, please? One, to go back to meditation, if we're doing 5 minutes and then resting 5 minutes, if the 5 minutes goes well to the point that one could go beyond the 5 minutes without realizing it and carry on, might forget to stop, in other words. Is that actually a weakness of practice or not? And tied in with that, if one comes to the end of the 5 minutes, could one then relax and rest by using what you described as the king?
네, 그리고 니에가래 럼치 데랭 럼치 길랍스기 나라 데네 공잡도 카마솜시 나 담폴라 yap데네 tet스나 말스 카마솜시 나 여래 데나 데 감nga 제도 갑갑라 공 야포 잡긴도 데나 감nga레 tet스 림포 로긴도 데 야포도 야포멘도 데 엔지멘지 담보 감nga 데네 tetsugaso dani kamanga tetsugaso gugendo the rangshingi tes tusurumpo la jona the digendo yapodo the kamanga ngare the trim songgugendo
다 ngaroso le 동보 빠냐나 까까레 때서 리만다라 요나 히마레 까까레 때서 지 통송다고 요서레 그래지나 리동보 발라 노도를 빈지완도레 테나 리동보 바 비나는 전도 강 가디 강나용 오 조지 림본다고 강터지 강 차디 되라 림본다고 강 tanke이나 대서 림보 강난 린두 타타타바 많이 바 까까라 대서 지리완다고 요 까까라 마공다고 들리이나 마디나 통거리 전도 통도 시거래 Jandal Kadi Guanayon, Rimbunda Guantana, then it is a Jiringonai. Indeed, the Mayimpa, Kakalarianda, Kakatuana, Rimbo Castle, Range, Tuntu Castle, Tunji, then the Mayimpa, the Ezogito, Tunji Gona Yapu, attend. Carry Dinano, Nidisore. Gone Yapu, you do Tirano, gone to Jayana. Yapu, you are Gone Yapu, made to Jayana. Nipagon because I'll pay Calio, Tina, gone Tom because Yapu, you because Tika take your own. Then Nimaso, then Nipagona, Nipatal pay Yapu, Panto Yore, then Kajikoma Tonjik in the Sore. Then Matina, Lietombo Palana, to Tombo Sena. Pepento Yojit, and the Pena Rimonda, Tombo Casa, Rigo, Rimbona, Camachunda was in Denny. Nyorona, Denny gone Yambatata Nyoto Chop. Denina, to Gona, Yenrimbola, Dezoji Nipatonzi, Panto Yori.
The Drupon Khenpo Lhabu, Nipare, the Yena, the Nausoki Cup, the Deutunchum Chigi, Mikpayana, Kamangaki Jela, Chik the Nausoche, the Gendo, Nausoki Tsapto, then Katsangi Gongshana, Datawaki Gongshana, Gong Shiniki, Jalpo Draboki. The Nausoki Tsapto, Jenna Yapudo Yapumenda.
Did Drat the Educator, that's all. Carry Lana, the Gong Asomari, Gong Jabu the Jerry, Akasu, Ringasum Mary, Gong Zavangamata, Shinik Zavangamatari, Tina Nasu Merita.
That's all.
They Pianana, Teona. Dear Gonji that a gumari, the gong uni gone Yahidamari, gone Yahida Usunasunda Gonly Ladi, the gone Yahitari, the one that gone Chipo Gomari that a lia, the in a Didira, Masumiri, Carrezina, gone Jowly, gone match being on a gone Jowry. The days of a Kenzanda.
As for the first question, then it's if the meditation goes beyond, say, the 5 minutes, if 5 minutes is the target, because the meditation's going well, there's nothing wrong with that in itself. If the meditation is quite erratic, that is to say, sometimes it could go for 6-7 minutes, sometimes it could go for 2-3 minutes with a fairly clear, settled mind on the focus, then the thing to do would be to draw back the target so that, say, 3 minutes is the target, and then all of those 3 minutes are good and effective. And then when that's very, very stable, then to make it more and more. But that having been said, there is really very great benefit in meditating in short seconds, and even in cutting short what we could call a good meditation, that is to say when the mind is perfectly well settled. If one's make it a sort of 5-minute target, remembering that we're not sitting there with a stopwatch, this is just sort of a general thing. But if it is going well, but that sort of time session you're used to has come to its end, there's a very great benefit in cutting the meditation short, because you stop on a good point. It puts saliva in the mouth for the next session. Your mind is well settled, you have the joy of meditation, and you stop because you know this is a healthy thing to do. So then you're anxious to get back, you're looking forward to getting back. Whereas if we stretch the 5 minutes to 10, because it's been going well for 8 or 9 minutes, so we leave it to run, but then the thoughts come up and then you end up on a spoiled note. It's not an appetizer for the next session. We're getting to the point where each meditation session ends on a down. So the Kagyu masters of old used to put great emphasis on this, doing short, high quality bursts of meditation. Oh yeah, and the second question, Rinpoche said, this is a strange question. And I hope I understood it correctly, because he was saying to use the king of meditations as a break between the others. He says that to me sounds very strange, because first of all, if you can do it, then that's the meditation to be doing. And then also, because it is really something we should treasure as the king of meditation, to see it as a break meditation is not so good. So, going back to the answer to the first question, this was, then it's like when we eat food. When there's really delicious food, then we're really looking forward to the next time we can eat some more of it. But when the food's not terrific, not very good tasting, we can't say we're looking forward to the next time we go to that restaurant or next time we have that particular meal. So it's like this with meditation. We build up a reaction to meditation. If it's really enjoyable, if it's really interesting, if it's really producing something and we stop there, then we're really looking forward to coming back to more. Whereas if it's a mess, then you're not looking forward to, if it's not so good, then you're not looking forward to coming back to it. It's the same with anything when it comes to enthusiasm. So there we finish for the time. So maybe we'll take any more questions next time. Oh, sorry. No, there's time for one. There was one there, Jane. Yeah.
We discussed before, it's about caring. And from my perspective of having been involved in healthcare as a senior nurse, as a group of doctors and nurses who would be administering drugs, that at times tell the patient their life would be ended, or in intensive care, for example, when I was a senior sister in Burns unit, we would give lots of painkillers to somebody who would not live to take away the pain, but we knew that the dose of drugs would then end the person's life very quickly. And so it's one of those situations where when is it killing and what is our collective karma? And as Buddhists, do we say that we can't take part in that kind of situation, or how does it affect us?
Neyok, then the min kam ginang la kabla the minasa pe shu champo yina, then the Quran so the shikira tentenre, kabla Drupon Khenpo Lhabu, then Drabo yina, then the mimpa the tsimen ge tets shu champo ge nangenda, then the rewa mena yina, then dunga champo yina. The Dujun at Simen Gogendo, then the Dujun at Shuchamboge, Shimen, Simen ge Kapjakendo, the Nampala, the Sok Chepare, Mare, Ninjekilakar, Mare, that's Sherona.
So je ma je de hema hila song dong ge de hiro din so je bare de hime na so je ba mare da la song dong le ga se hen ru yi on de dong na hiro yin na ya ni ba yo re 시샤가 니제라 리니오레 니제라 리니오디 디라나 히라라 멤바 송지 셈바고 쇼바다라 송지 전에니 가요레 가바자오레 히라야 보여 근데 송지 셈발라요 다 히라 하고서 뭐냐 대메나 니제라 에 세니 모버리죠레 니제라 니바 모버쇼죠레 아 드냐사 먹어서 디코스 이거나 또 송지 셈이 니제 저트히오 봐 말에 니지 세디 되라나 지보를 팬토 바지오 거 말에 또 팬토사다 조이노니 조 니가라 말에 다들아 팬토지 지오 거 말에 베나가 두고 또 오나 사마지 제이거나 팬도 요래가 니가라 두고 저 말에 대에 나요 베나나 네바다바지 네 차보체지 테나 디 네더 이 리모그 동안 용체지 말이 이 노니 로카히 디 동하다 지메 제메지 말이 레전드라 대한 쇼와지리 노바 송지베 가르송을 첸덜 동한 말에도 제 심할 동한 말이니 첸덜 동한 말나 편도 요바리 드바도도 치레 된디 송어리 대이나니 코로고 동하 대용 코로나 뭐소나 대용 시야마 코 먹이 비서비 노마라 대니 디동하도 용 말에 되면 코로 먹이 비서비 그 노마 마연 빠지고 동한 용 말에 농비케 도제나 진디케네 말에 진디케요나 정마요나 레버 동하 진레 말에 딘 레버도 코로 용 거래 송어래 되면 야그 틈말이 대이나 대용 코로 동하 용지다 대니 돈도 메바라오지 처음 말에 가로 파디나 돈도 메바라오 동하면 가리디 문이시나 디 동하다냐라 대니 디파 더 놓으시오 바리 코롱 험하게 두겨리 이거지 너무 더 오래디 너무 더 메바를 쳐서나 되니 코롱 디파 더 놓아라 된디인디 되라나 대니 코롱 고등한 용어졌다 더 메바지 말이 더 요바지 쳐도 그래 코롱구나 된디인디 되라나 더라나 뒤제나 라세나 수지나 니바 요리 더라 쇼 송지 셈바 탈라 많기 비그 쇼바리 또 송지 전에니 과파자요 그래 대용 베타 키비 고니 하고 근데 내 니반디소 니반문디 세나 가리 편도디 세나 니반디소 문디 따라 야보지 히라가 야보지 고제 히거든.
As far as the technicality of it goes, then killing very simply means taking life. So if an action shortens life, takes away somebody's life, that's killing. That's very straightforward in the definition. To kill is to shorten somebody's life, or to actually make them dead on the spot. Whether that action of shortening somebody's life is a deed of compassion or not is another question. I mean, it is killing, there's no doubt about it. Whether that is, killing itself is an act of compassion or not, there are two ways it can happen. One is where the person who does the act has method and skillful means, has skillful method and wisdom. Skillful method and wisdom and skillful means. Then in that case, if the doctor or the person who administers the drug, the killing dose, is a bodhisattva with all of the sort of wisdom that we mean by wisdom, and so therefore the application of skillful method, which Rinpoche didn't describe, but it goes into what you can do through karmic connection and so on, then shortening the life could be an act of compassion. But if the doctor doesn't have that profound long-term wisdom, then it probably won't be, because there's the difference between short-term benefit and long-term benefit. Although it may seem to be easing the suffering in the moment, it's simply doing that, it's stopping the suffering for the moment. It doesn't mean it's taking away that suffering completely. Whatever suffering the patient would have gone through that's being alleviated by ending their life, it's only been taken away temporarily. And as Buddhists, we believe in karma, cause and effect. No suffering, just no serious suffering, such as a serious illness, happens all by itself. Every serious suffering has its cause in past karma. And in the teachings on karma, we see that the non-virtuous actions are the ones that lead to suffering, and that those non-virtuous actions have to be experienced by the person who did them and that person alone. They can't be experienced by somebody else. It's also taught that having the sort of human existence that we ourselves have is the finest juncture, the finest circumstance for purifying past actions by living through them. That is to say, the suffering we go through now as humans is little compared with the suffering we go through due to the same karma in some other state. So even though it's painful, it is a very precious thing to be human and go through suffering, because through a little suffering here we can get rid of a karma that might be an enormous suffering in some other state. So when we say the doctor would, or the person administering it would need to have wisdom and skillful means, it would mean they'd need to know the patient's karma. They'd need to know what would happen to the patient after death in another existence, whether that final act of administering what they're administering would finish off the karma, or whether in fact it's just postponed it, and that karma, which could have been a few more days' pain, might be something quite different. They'd need that degree of wisdom and many, many other factors. Then it would be a deed of compassion. Otherwise, it might be a deed of seemingly compassionate ignorance.
Then Tandro Pembo, Mombo, Sancha Mombo Dua, then Aroso, Lengan de Tandro Jindu, de Tandro Jindu, de Logasegana. Then Dunga Chekin Sanchano Mari, Mo Dunga Chekimara, Oya, Tandro Dunga Chekira. The Tandro Chinam Bochi Dua, Lenga, quote Tandro, Lenga, Dunga Chibore, say, Oya Bavanda was in Sandra Cherry on a Logasegana, Yapomera. The Dinan, Dungali Tazi, Tayodina, Segana did Tamiana.
If the act of taking someone else's life can really put an end to their suffering or to that suffering, if the person who does it has that power, then that's one thing. But if they don't have the power to take away that whatever suffering that person has, then they're just putting the suffering off to a later date. It has to come up. Rinpoche says, look, for the three lower realms, we know that they're the worst suffering in the whole of existence. If it was the case that just by killing you could take away the suffering, then we could go around stamping on the insects, killing the frogs, thinking that's a miserable existence. Boff, that's put an end to that karma. It's all finished. Boff, you squash another one, you kill another one. Because anything that's the lower state of existence, you think by killing it, I've taken away the misery, because that's the greatest misery. Then it's not at all the case.
Kone bondara bera jo padala me shape dambadan kanya yola de je yoada taje male sozo je jane yodo sanje salang kabara jo
If there's a chance, glad you're being better too. What's the red light?
Secret.
We had red lights.
Secret teaching. I still owe me to
It
change
means you
all
must change the tape.
Now you reminded me to change my battery.
All right.
You thought I was human. I didn't ask him about the collective karma because I know.
So I guess the question is, so under prescription of given on the last days more from something collectively I would have been participating in the decision-making process, it would be adopted and always give it. But I was a member of that team. So what is our, if you like, our karma situation? Are we there? Have we killed somebody? In the strictest sense, in fact, we got killed as well.
Okay, so I need to ask him that. I had to ask him. But then I give my own sort of opinion.
Looking like a murderer.